The fluorescent lights in Chase Bank felt like interrogation lamps as I stared at the computer screen, my hands trembling so violently that the teller had to steady my wrist. $487.23, she repeated softly, as if saying it gentler would somehow make it less devastating. That's impossible, I whispered, my voice cracking. Check again, please. But I already knew she wasn't wrong. The evidence was right there, mocking me in stark digital numbers. Yesterday, that account held $268,000. My entire life savings, every sacrifice, every skipped meal, every double shift that worked for the past 30 years, gone. Mrs. Chen, the bank manager, Patricia, approached with a glass of water and a chair. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The transaction history blurred through my tears, but one line stood out like a neon sign. Wire transfer to Sapphire Enterprises, LLC, $75,000. Then another, and another. 8 transfers over 6 months, bleeding me dry. Sapphire Enterprises, I muttered, the name tasting like poison. That's Brittany's company. Patricia's face went pale. She knew my son David. Everyone at this branch did. I had been bringing him here since he was 7, teaching him to save his allowance in his little passbook account. Now he was CEO of Chen Technologies, his face on the cover of Seattle Business Monthly just last month. Mrs. Chen, Patricia said quietly, sliding a tissue box across her desk, perhaps you should know something else. These transfers, they were authorized using your online banking credentials, but the IP address shows they were made from your son's office. The glass of water slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound seemed to echo forever, like the breaking of something far more precious than glass. My son, my David, whom I carried through every storm, for whom I rebuilt my life after his father left, had stolen everything from me. For her. 20 minutes later, I sat in my 2010 Honda Civic in the parking garage, watching my hands shake on the steering wheel. The parking fee was $12. Yesterday, I wouldn't have thought twice. Today, I counted the bills 3 times. The drive to Chen Technologies took me through downtown Seattle, past the landmarks of my son's rise. The coffee shop where he'd pitched his first investor, the apartment building where we'd lived in a studio while he attended UW, the gleaming 40-story tower where his company occupied the top 3 floors. I remembered the day he'd called me, breathless with excitement. Mom, we got the penthouse floors. Can you believe it? Your son's made it to the top. Now, standing in that same lobby, I felt like a stranger. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect teeth and a designer dress worth more than my car, looked through me like I was invisible. I'm here to see David Chen. Do you have an appointment? I'm his mother. Her smile flickered with confusion. Oh, he didn't mention. Let me call up. She made me wait 47 minutes. I counted every one. When the elevator finally opened to the executive floor, David emerged from his corner office looking annoyed. At 34, he was devastatingly handsome in his $3,000 suit, every inch the successful CEO. Nothing like the scrawny boy who'd sobbed in my arms when the other kids mocked him his secondhand clothes. Mom, what are you doing here? I'm in the middle of... We need to talk. Now. Can't this wait? I have a meeting with... Now, David. Something in my voice must have penetrated his corporate armor, because he sighed and gestured me into his office. The view was spectacular. Elliott Bay stretching endlessly, the Olympic Mountains painted purple in the distance. I'd cleaned office buildings with views like this, emptying trash cans at 3 a.m. while David slept safely at home. What's this about, Mom? You look upset. My bank account is empty. He didn't even flinch, just walked to his chrome and glass bar and poured himself a scotch. I told you I was making some investments on your behalf. The market's been volatile. Don't. My voice came out harder than I'd ever used with him. Don't you dare lie to me. Sapphire Enterprises, Brittany's company. It's a legitimate business opportunity. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Her wellness brand is going to revolutionize my entire life's savings, David. Mom, you're overreacting. It's just an investment. You don't understand modern business. The door opened, and she walked in. Brittany Lawson, 26 years old, stunning in a way that required significant financial investment. Her Hermes bag alone cost $15,000. I knew because I'd spent 3 months researching briefcases before buying David a $500 one for his first job. Babe, the Maserati dealer called about... She stopped, noticing me. Her smile was sharp as a blade. Oh, Margaret, how nice to see you. I stared at this woman who'd been dating my son 8 months. 8 months, and my life's work had vanished into her manicured hands. David's been so generous. He really believes in supporting female entrepreneurs. Aren't you proud of him for empowering women? The audacity of it, the calculated cruelty, took my breath away. She was wearing my retirement, my security, my dreams on her back and around her neck, and she wanted me to applaud. That money was for my retirement, I said quietly. David finally looked at me, and his expression made my heart shatter all over again. Impatience mixed with condescension, like I was a problem to be managed rather than the woman who'd given him life. Mom, you don't need that much money sitting in a savings account earning nothing. This is why I handle your finances. You're too conservative, too stuck in old thinking. Brittany's company is going to triple that investment within a year. What company? I asked. What does Sapphire Enterprises actually do? Brittany's laugh tinkled like breaking crystal. It's a lifestyle wellness brand focusing on holistic. Show me, I interrupted. Show me your business plan, your revenue projections, your current sales. The silence stretched taut. David's jaw clenched, the same tell he'd had since childhood when caught in a lie. We don't owe you, Brittany started. You owe me $268,000. So yes, you do. Mom, please. David's voice turned coaxing, the tone he'd used as a child wanting just one more cookie. The question hung in the air like a bad joke. I thought of the 18-hour days I'd worked to pay for his Stanford tuition, the rheumatoid arthritis I'd developed from years of cleaning chemicals, hidden so he wouldn't worry, the dates I'd turned down, the life I'd put on hold, the dreams I'd buried, all for him. I need to go, I said, standing on unsteady legs. Mom, I need to go, I repeated, not trusting myself to say more. As I walked past Brittany, she stage whispered to David, "Is she always this dramatic?" I made it to the elevator before the tears came. As the doors closed, I heard David's voice, "Don't worry about her. She'll calm down. She always does." But I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the small apartment I'd kept in Chinatown, the one David didn't know about. My hands steadied as I climbed the familiar stairs. Inside, I opened my laptop and began typing, my fingers flying across the keyboard with the speed of someone who'd once been one of Seattle's top financial analysts. First, I logged into the joint account I'd foolishly maintained, the one David had convinced me to keep for emergencies. The transaction history unfolded like a horror story. $500,000 transferred over 8 months, each payment labeled consulting fees or business development. My brilliant son hadn't even tried to be creative with his theft.
But it was Brittany's Instagram that truly ignited the fury in my chest. Posted just 3 days ago, a photo of her lounging on a yacht in Dubai captioned, "Self-made entrepreneur life, #bossbabe, #no handouts, #building my empire." Below that, a picture of a white Maserati, then a Miami beachfront condo, a shopping spree at Rodeo Drive. My life's work transformed into a spoiled child's Instagram feed.
I clicked on her company page. Sapphire Enterprises had no website, no products, no employees, just a P.O. box and an LLC filing. My son had given my retirement to fund his girlfriend's fantasy lifestyle. But the final insult came in a video posted just hours ago. Brittany, surrounded by shopping bags, laughing with friends at a champagne brunch. "You know what I love about my man?" she gushed to the camera. "He knows how to treat a queen. None of that struggle love nonsense. If he can't provide, what's the point?" One of her friends asked, "But what about his family? Doesn't his mom, need help or something?" Brittany's laugh was cold as winter rain. "That's not my problem. I'm building an empire, not running a charity." I closed the laptop slowly, my tears dry now, replaced by something harder and more precise. My reflection in the dark screen showed a woman I hadn't seen in decades. Not the devoted mother, not the sacrificing saint, but Margaret Chen, summa cum laude in finance from WU, the analyst who'd once detected a $1 million embezzlement scheme that had earned her a promotion and a reputation. That woman had been dormant for 34 years, buried under layers of maternal devotion and sacrifice. But that night she was wide awake. If you want to play games with a financial analyst who raised you alone, let me teach you how the game is really played. I opened the laptop again and began making a list. Bank records, tax documents, corporate filings, social media evidence. My son thought he was smart, but he'd forgotten who taught him his first lessons about money. He'd also forgotten that before I was his mother, I was someone else entirely. Someone he should never have crossed. The next 3 days, I moved through Seattle like a ghost with a purpose. Every morning at 4 a.m., the same hour I used to start my first cleaning shift, I was already at my laptop, excavating the financial ruins of my trust. What I found made my stomach turn. It wasn't just the money. It was the premeditation. The first transfer happened 2 days after I'd mentioned my arthritis was getting worse. "Don't worry, Mom," David had said, holding my swollen hands. "I'll take care of you." He'd taken care of me all right, cleaned me out while looking me in the eyes at Sunday dinners. My power of attorney, the document I'd signed when David turned 25 because it's just practical, Mom, in case of emergencies, had become his master key. But in his arrogance, he'd never revoked it. My baby boy, so drunk on his own success, had forgotten that the woman who taught him to count money could still count better than him. Janet Kim answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Chen? Is everything okay?"
Janet had been David's first employee, hired when Chen Technologies was just 3 people in a borrowed office. Last month, David had laid her off for efficiency after she'd questioned some financial irregularities. Her severance package had included a brutal non-disclosure agreement. "Janet, I need to see you. Today." We met at the International District Library, the same one where I'd taught David to read, checking out stacks of books because we couldn't afford to buy them. Janet looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes that matched my own. "He's changed, Mrs. Chen," she said without preamble. "Ever since Brittany came into the picture, it's like he's a different person. Tell me everything." What she told me made my hands shake with rage. Brittany hadn't just seduced my son, she'd orchestrated a systematic takeover. First, she'd convinced David to fire anyone who questioned him. Then she'd pushed for access to company funds. Last week, she'd been pressuring him to transfer company shares to her name for tax purposes. "There's more," Janet whispered, sliding a USB drive across the table. I kept copies, everything, including emails between them about... She paused, pain flickering across her face. "About you." I plugged the drive into my laptop that night,
and immediately wished I hadn't. From Brittany Lawson to David Chen. Subject, your mother. Babe, I told you, she's had her time. Old people don't need that much money anyway. What's she gonna do, live another 30 years? You're building an empire. She should be grateful her sacrifice is funding something meaningful. Besides, it's technically your money since you're gonna inherit it anyway. Why wait? From David Chen to Brittany Lawson. Subject, your mother. You're right. She doesn't understand modern business. All those years of saving and scrimping, for what? So money can rot in a bank account? At least with us, it's creating something. She'll thank me when Sapphire goes public. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until my ribs ached. My baby, my brilliant, beautiful boy, who'd cried when he accidentally stepped on a butterfly at age 6, who'd written me poems on Mother's Day with crayons and construction paper, who'd promised me at his college graduation, tears streaming down his face, that every sacrifice had been worth it. That boy was gone. Or maybe he'd never existed at all. The next morning, I called Robert Martinez, our family lawyer for 20 years. David had tried to replace him 6 months ago with someone younger and hungrier. Robert had been hurt, but professional about it. Now, sitting in his familiar office that smelled like leather and justice, I laid out everything.
Margaret, he said after reviewing the documents, this is fraud. Criminal fraud. Your son could go to prison. I don't want him in prison, I said. I want him to remember who raised him. Robert's smile was sharp. Then let's remind him. My third ally came unexpectedly. I was sitting in the Chen Technologies lobby. They couldn't keep me from the public areas when Mrs. Kim approached. 68 years old, worth approximately $50 million, and David's biggest investor. Margaret, I heard you were here. Security says you've been coming every day. I straightened my second-hand coat, the same one I'd worn for 15 years. Mrs. Kim, she studied me with sharp eyes that missed nothing. You look terrible. Thank you. Don't be smart with me. I remember when you worked at Pierce Financial. You found that embezzlement scheme everyone else missed, saved the company millions. She paused. I also remember when you quit to raise David alone. Waste of talent, I said then. Not a waste, I said quietly. I thought I was building something better than a career. She sat beside me, her Chanel suit a stark contrast to my faded clothes. Your son's been acting strange lately. Sloppy, distracted. There's a Microsoft acquisition in the works. Did you know? My heart stopped. Microsoft? $40 million, but they're demanding a full audit. Very thorough people, Microsoft. Her eyes glinted. Be a shame if they found financial irregularities. The deal would die instantly. She stood, smoothing her skirt. I'm having lunch at the Four Seasons tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Perhaps you should join me. That night, I executed phase 1 of my plan. Using my power of attorney, I froze every joint account. Not dramatically, just a series of small holds for security verification. David wouldn't notice for days, but when he did, the phone rang at 11 p.m. David panicked. Mom, there's something wrong with the accounts. I can't access. Oh, dear, I said, letting my voice quaver. I've been getting these strange calls about identity theft. I called the bank to put some security holds. Did I do something wrong? Mom, I need access to those funds immediately. There's a time-sensitive investment. At 11 at night? It's international. Dubai time. Dubai, where Brittany was headed next week for another business trip. I'll call the bank first thing Monday. I promise. Is everything okay, sweetheart? You sound stressed. It's fine. Just call them Monday, early. Of course, baby. You know I would do anything for you.
The silence on his end stretched so long, I wondered if he had hung up. Then, I know, Mom. I know. After he hung up, I sat in my dark apartment and let myself cry, not from sadness, but from fury. He knew. He knew what I would do for him, had always done for him, and he used that knowledge as a weapon against me.
But the best part of my plan was yet to come, because while David thought he was playing chess, I'd already figured out that Brittany was playing a different game entirely, and I had the receipts, literally, to prove it. The USB drive from Janet contained more than just cruel emails. It contained invoices. Brittany's company, Sapphire Enterprises, had been billing Chen Technologies for consulting services, but the invoices were dated before the company was even formed. She'd been falsifying documents, creating a paper trail for money that was simply funding her lifestyle. That was tax fraud, wire fraud, and because some of the money had crossed state lines to that Miami condo, it was federal. I compiled everything meticulously the way I'd once built fraud cases that had stood up in court. Then I did something David would never expect. I called the IRS. "I'd like to report suspected tax evasion," I said calmly. "I have documentation of fraudulent invoicing and money laundering through a shell company." The agent on the other end perked up. The IRS loves nothing more than a well-documented case, especially one involving $500,000. "Can you email those documents?" "Already done," I said, hitting send on the encrypted file I'd prepared. As I hung up, I looked at the photo on my desk. David, at 5, grinning toothlessly, wearing the Superman cape I'd sewn from old curtains, because we couldn't afford a real costume. You wanted to play superhero, but you forgot. Every hero needs a villain to teach them humility. And baby, Mama's about to show you what a real supervillain looks like. Tomorrow I would weep and wail in David's office, playing the confused elderly mother. I would embarrass him in front of his employees, make them question what kind of man lets his mother beg for grocery money while his girlfriend flaunts wealth on Instagram. Because the thing about sacrificing everything for your child, it teaches you patience, endurance, and how to play a very, very long game. David thought he'd robbed me blind, but I'd been watching him since the day he was born. I knew every tell, every weakness, every fear, and I was about to use them all.
The Microsoft meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on Thursday. I arrived at 1:45, wearing my best dress, the navy blue one I'd bought secondhand for David's college graduation. The security guard tried to stop me. "I'm a shareholder," I said, producing documents I'd kept for 15 years, "and David Chen's mother." The conference room fell silent when I entered. 12 people around a gleaming table, Microsoft's acquisition team, David's executives, and my son himself, who went pale as printer paper when he saw me. "Mom?" His voice cracked like he was 14 again. "What are you doing here?" "Protecting my investment," I said, taking an empty chair. "Gentlemen, ladies, I apologize for interrupting, but there are some financial matters you need to know before this acquisition proceeds." The Microsoft team leader, a woman named Sandra Torres, leaned forward. "Mrs. Chen, while we appreciate your concern, $500,000, I interrupted, sliding copies of bank statements across the table. "Transferred from Chen Technologies accounts to a shell company called Sapphire Enterprises over the past 8 months, labeled as consulting fees." The room erupted. David shot to his feet. "Those were legitimate business expenses." "Were they?" I pulled out Brittany's Instagram posts, printed in full color, because Sapphire Enterprises' only online presence seems to be your girlfriend's social media, where she documents spending company money on luxury goods. Sandra Torres is scanning the documents, her expression darkening. "Mr. Chen, can you explain these transfers?" "My mother is confused," David said desperately. "She doesn't understand modern business. I understand embezzlement. I understand fraud, and I understand that the IRS is already investigating Sapphire Enterprises for tax evasion." That was my nuclear bomb. The Microsoft team recoiled like I'd thrown a grenade.
An IRS investigation would trigger a forensic audit. The deal would be dead before the ink dried. We need to discuss this internally, Sandra said coldly. Mr. Chen, you have 48 hours to resolve this matter or Microsoft withdraws from negotiations. The meeting ended in chaos. As the Microsoft team filed out, I heard one whisper, $40 million down the drain because he couldn't keep his hands out of the till. David cornered me in the hallway, his face twisted with rage. What have you done? What you forced me to do? You've ruined everything. Do you understand? Everything? Like you ruined my retirement, my trust, my belief that I raised a decent human being? He grabbed my shoulders and for a moment I saw something terrifying in his eyes. A stranger wearing my son's face. Fix this. Call them back. Tell them you were mistaken. Return my money? I can't. It's tied up in Brittany's shopping sprees. I shrugged off his hands. Then I can't fix this either. My phone buzzed. A text from Robert Martinez. IRS just contacted Brittany. She's at my office, crying, trying to make a deal. I showed David the message. His face went from red to white to gray. She's turning on you, I said quietly. When cornered, rats always eat each other. Within an hour, Brittany was in full self-preservation mode. She arrived at Chen Technologies with her own lawyer, mascara streaking her perfect cheekbones. David made me do this, she sobbed, to anyone who'd listen. He said it was legal. He said his mother was senile and wouldn't notice.
I watched from the lobby as my son's world imploded. Employees whispered. Investors called emergency meetings. The local news picked up the story. Tech CEO accused of defrauding elderly mother. That night, David came to my apartment. Not the Chinatown one. He'd found my real home, the tiny studio where I'd lived frugally while he spent my savings. He looked destroyed, tie askew, eyes red-rimmed. Mom, please, I'll lose everything. I was making tea, the same chamomile blend I'd made when he had nightmares as a child. You already lost everything that mattered. The company will collapse. 300 people will lose their jobs. Then you should have thought of them before you stole from your mother. He collapsed on my couch, the same one I bought used when he was in high school. I didn't mean... Brittany said it was just temporary, that we'd pay it back with interest. Stop. My voice was sharp enough to cut. Don't you dare blame her entirely. You signed every transfer. You wrote those emails calling me outdated and useless. You chose this. I'm sorry. Sorry you got caught. We sat in silence while the tea steeped. Finally, I spoke. There's one way to save your company. His head snapped up, hope flickering in his eyes. Sign everything over to me. The money you stole plus damages. Publicly acknowledge what you did, step down as CEO, and work your way back up from entry level, proving you deserve a second chance. You want me to give up my company? I want you to earn it, the way I earned every dollar you stole. The board already called me. I smiled grimly. Mrs. Kim made sure of that. They're willing to appoint me interim CEO to save the Microsoft deal. The irony was delicious. The mother he'd deemed too old and ignorant to handle money would now run his tech empire. You're destroying me, he whispered. I'm rebuilding you, I corrected. The question is whether you're strong enough to be rebuilt. When it was done, when the lawyers had left and Brittany had fled in tears, I stood at the window of the office I'd cleaned 30 years ago as a night janitor, full circle. David stood beside me, looking lost. What now? Now you learn what I learned when your father left us with nothing. How to build something from scratch. How to earn instead of take. How to value what you have before it's gone. Do you hate me? I turned to look at my son, really look at him. Beneath the expensive suit and executive ego, I could still see glimpses of the boy who'd shared his lunch with classmates,
who'd forgotten theirs. He was in there, somewhere, buried under layers of greed and entitlement.
I love you enough to let you fail, I said, and love you enough to help you stand back up. But this time, you'll do the standing on your own. He nodded, tears finally coming. I'm sorry, Mom. Really sorry. Not just for getting caught, for becoming someone who could do this to you. Then become someone who couldn't, I said simply. Start tomorrow. Junior analyst position. $60,000 a year. Prove to me that I didn't waste 34 years raising a stranger. As he left, shoulders bowed but not broken, I allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. Then I called Mrs. Kim. The Microsoft deal is back on, I said. Chen Technologies has new leadership. I heard, she chuckled. A 62-year-old woman running a tech company. The media is having a field day. Good, I said, settling into my son's former chair. Let them watch what this old woman can do. Because the truth was, I'd never needed David's money. I had another account, one he'd never known about, carefully invested and grown over decades. This had been a test, one he'd failed spectacularly. But every good teacher knows the most important lessons come from the hardest tests, and class was now in session. 6 months later, I stood before Chen Technologies' annual shareholder meeting wearing a designer suit I'd bought with my own CEO salary. Not stolen money, but earned through 16-hour days salvaging my son's company. Revenue is up 37%, I announced, to thunderous applause. Employee satisfaction has reached an all-time high. And the Microsoft acquisition closed at $45 million, $5 million more than originally offered. In the third row, I spotted David, junior analyst badge clipped to his basic suit, taking notes by hand because junior analysts didn't get laptops in meetings. He'd been working 60-hour weeks, bringing coffee, filing reports, earning every penny of his entry-level salary. The other analysts had tried to curry favor at first, knowing he was the founder, but David had shut them down. He said, I'm nobody special, just another guy trying to prove he belongs here. After the meeting, I found him at his cubicle, a far cry from his former corner office. The walls were bare except for one photo, us at his high school graduation, both crying with joy. Good presentation, Mrs. Chen, he said formally. Thank you, Analyst Chen. I paused. Your report on the Singapore expansion was excellent. Finance says it could save us $2 million annually. His face lit up, the first genuine smile I'd seen in months. Really? Really. Keep it up, and you might make senior analyst by year end. That evening, we met for our new tradition, Sunday dinners at my Chinatown apartment. I cooked the same simple meals I'd made when he was young. Rice, vegetables, whatever protein was on sale. He ate with genuine appreciation now, understanding the value of every grain.
I saw Brittany today, he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. She's working at Nordstrom, selling handbags. He shook his head. She tried to talk to me, said she was sorry, that we could start over. And I told her I was already starting over, just not with her. Pride bloomed in my chest. Good. Mom, he set down his chopsticks. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand how I became that person. Dr. Williams says it wasn't about the money. It was about power, about proving I was better than where I came from. And what do you think? I think, he struggled for words, I think I was so ashamed of being poor as a kid that I overcorrected, became someone who valued wealth over everything, even over the person who sacrificed everything so I wouldn't stay poor. We sat with that truth between us, heavy but necessary. I've been teaching financial literacy at the community center to seniors who are afraid their children will take advantage of them. Yesterday, a woman cried because her daughter drained her savings for a pyramid scheme. David flinched. Do they know who you are? The CEO whose son stole her retirement? Yes. That's why they trust me. I've been where they are. I'm sorry, he said for the 100th time. I know, but sorry isn't enough. Action is. That's why I'm donating half my salary to your financial literacy program. Anonymously, he added quickly. I don't want credit. I just want to help fix what I broke. Not just with us, but with others. I reached across the table and took his hand, the first time I'd touched him voluntarily in months. That's a start. A year later, at the company Christmas party, I announced my retirement. The board had found my replacement, a brilliant woman who'd earned her position through merit, not connections. But first, I said, I want to recognize our Employee of the Year, someone who started at the bottom and worked tirelessly to prove himself, David Chen. The applause was genuine. His colleagues had watched him transform from entitled founder to humble worker. He'd earned their respect the hard way. As he accepted the award, David spoke briefly. A year ago, I learned that success without integrity is just failure with money. My mother taught me that lesson, the hard way. Thanks, Mom, for not giving up on me. Later, as we walked through Pike Place Market, something we hadn't done since he was 12, David showed me his bank statement. Look, I've saved $20,000, living like you taught me, cooking at home, taking the bus, finding joy in simple things. I'm proud of you. I want to use it to start a fund for children of single parents who need help with college. Name it after you.
I stopped walking. David. Not for forgiveness, he said quickly. For forward. So other kids don't make my mistakes. So other mothers don't suffer like you did. I hugged my son then, really hugged him, for the first time since that awful day at the bank. He sobbed into my shoulder like he was 5 years old again, scared of thunder. I love you, I whispered. I always have, even when I hated what you'd become. I know, he whispered back. That's what saved me. 6 months after that, I retired for real. David had been promoted, legitimately, to department head. He'd earned it through innovation, dedication, and humility. The boy who'd once stolen from his mother now ran a charity that had helped 50 kids attend college. At my retirement party, someone asked if I regretted what happened. No, I said honestly, because sometimes the greatest gift a mother can give her child isn't money or opportunities, it's consequences. It's the chance to fail, face themselves, and choose to become better. Would you do it again? Take everything back? I looked at David across the room, laughing with colleagues who'd become real friends, wearing a modest suit he'd bought with earned money, planning a future built on integrity instead of greed. In a heartbeat, I said, because taking everything back gave me something priceless, my son, the real one, the one I'd raised before money corrupted him, the one who finally understood that wealth isn't what you have, but who you become earning it. And that was the truth. I hadn't destroyed my son that day in the bank. I'd saved him. From Brittany, from greed, but mostly from himself. The money had been replaced. Trust had been rebuilt. But the lesson, that would last forever. Sometimes the hardest thing a mother can do is let her child fall. But sometimes it's the only way to teach them how to stand.